our final session, and this will just be a wrap-up talk about how do we solve all this stuff. Content 2050. What should a flourishing and factual content ecosystem look like? And maybe that Will can help us out with some of this. Will, can you just give a short introduction of who you are and what you do? And then maybe that will lead us into our bigger discussion of some of the solutions for some of the things we've been talking about.
Certainly. Will Kreth, founder and CEO of Hand Human Digital. Proud to say that we were able to announce on June 4th at the Content Authenticity Summit here in New York the stand-up of our public benefit corporation, HAND, the Universal Talent Identifier. And we heard Nathan and others talk earlier today, and also Rob, around how do you know you're dealing with a person who is living and breathing and sneezing on this planet. In a conversation over a mediated environment, over a transactional model. My short story on why I set down the path of creating a talent identifier for public figures and notable individuals is that the talent agency CAA in 2018 asked me to create this when I was the executive director of the Entertainment ID Registry, which is essentially a kind of like a barcode for the film and TV industry. Another public benefit, well, a 501 trade, a C6 trade association, a nonprofit as well. So we, in standing this up to have a organization dedicated to having a freely resolvable, globally unique public identifier, are part of the story in working with C2PA and CAI and our good friends at the International Press Telecommunications Council, IPTC. Helga is here today, around the notion of personhood credentials, which is now gaining traction, and people are talking about proof of personhood, personal credentials. What will be the manifestation of that? How will we be able to see the verifiable credentials presented and surfaced in interactions between people online, and so that trust can be recaptured for a lot of us who are seeing the erosion of trust in interactions with others who we know fairly well, not well at all, complete strangers, or trusted friends. One of the key things I mention to people when they ask me what I do is like, do you have a word for your family that you only know, that if someone calls you with a I'm in trouble, I need to send me money, that you can say, what's the secret word, so that you can tell whether it's a deep fake voice injection attack or whether that's actually your child or grandparent or someone like that. All the different kind of ways in which we want to provide attestations of authenticity about the verifiable credentials of a person from all kinds of different kinds of interactions, both personal and business. All of those things seem to be up in the air and on the table these days. And so more signals of trust, more methods of authenticity and authentication are better, and there's no single road to Rome here. I think there are lots of pieces of the puzzle. I heard Manny earlier talk about his solutions. We heard Rob talking about trying to get verifiable sources in news stories. There's all kinds of questions at play here. So that's what I've been doing with this public figure notable talent identifier. And the video from that session is now on the Content Authenticity website from the lightning talk I gave at the June 4th event here in New York. But anyway, enough about me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. Also, I wanted to invite Manny, Rob. Did you want to join us as well if you're still on? Sergio? I can see that you're still on.
Yes.
Hey, guys.
Oh, great. Okay, let me get you on here as well.
Neal, I had a follow-up on Will's comment there, but
yeah, please do. Go for it. This is free for all.
Yeah, so beyond the work we do in proof mode, we do a lot with security and privacy technologies, and I also support a number of organizations in the U.S. like ACLU and other even religious groups that have public figures, right, that do a lot of public speaking and streaming and video of themselves out in the world. And they also face impersonation attacks. So whether it be, someone creating fake content, or there's a unique attack on churches in the US. I've discovered hundreds of churches face impersonation of their ministers, who then someone creates a fake email and then impersonates the asking for money and donations for someone who's sick in the hospital. It kind of started during COVID. And because the church is so public and there's so much content, it's kind of easy to impersonate. And I've started to talk to some of these organizations about the threat of their voice being deep faked because of how much hours and hours of their voices being online are, as well as reputation attacks in a similar way. It's a complex problem. We do come up with basic human rules like I would never ask you for money over email, or I would never do this. But we've also been thinking about kind of proactive, provenance and authentication tools in those workspaces as a way to kind of normalize their presence and not, and so it's an interesting thing for people that are so public to then have to also be more proactive to protect that work, and also to think about how some of the tooling, and if we're looking whatever it was 2050, or you want in C2PA there is some early things about flagging. AI flags do not train. This content is like a flag to not be allowed to be included. That's an assertion, and I think we want all the tools in the platforms to respect that, be it open source tools or commercial tools. So I'm hoping the ecosystem evolves such that, if you pull down a podcast and then load it in 11 Labs and it sees a flag, that it'll say, "Oop, I can't train off of that audio." Obviously, lots of loopholes, but
is metadata the right place to track that kind of thing, Nathan? Like if someone just takes my content, puts it on their website,
yeah,
it's
a start, but I think no, ultimately, but yeah, I think right now there is an opportunity. I don't know. I've been long a stickler for, like, I love filling out all the MP3 metadata and like organizing stuff. And if you added a secure layer and a watermark and a fingerprint, yes, it's an arms race. But like, there's such little being done now on that front that it feels, at least like you said, kind of getting your house in order might be a starting point.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that sort of copyright tracking thing because at least in the UK they've passed a new law saying that you need to opt out, or I don't know if it's already passed the House of Lords as well. And so you need a place where people can opt out, and that's going to be respected. Metadata seemed like the wrong place to do it because of this whole cross-posting thing. A repository of like content signatures seems like a better approach to me. Obviously, you get into tricky issues of who's hosting that repository.
Well, it's the same concept of the certificate chains for HTTPS. Why do we trust HTTPS connections? Because we delegate the certification of those certificates to a handful of authorities. That's it. Unless we have the same or the equivalent process for media, we're not going to have a source of truth. Who do we trust to validate the content?
Yeah, but there's good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. Certificate transparency made that whole system so much better, right? And that sort of decentralized control a lot more. And I'm always going to be more in favor of a system where there is at least consensus and not like top-down control of that infrastructure.
Will, what is your take on that in terms of, I mean, you're talking about things specifically for the content industry, which is kind of I guess, a fairly contained group. But in terms of creating authorities that everybody can refer to.
I think one thing I'm talking to a lot of folks around, as some of you may know, the content authenticity, or the creator assertions working group, COG, with this that spun out went to the Decentralized Identity Foundation, the DIF, is working with a liaison organizations like Trustful IP Foundation and others around what does a model of verification and credentials and authenticity look like for this emergent notion of personhood credentials. And so is it is it a completely decentralized model, or is it a, you heard Sergio talk about certificate authorities, or is it a hybrid? I think that we're probably going to see an emergence of hybrid models where some parts of the tool chain and the authenticity, the chain of trust will be decentralized, absolutely. And I think there'll be other parts that will be like signals and places for attestations of authenticity that it may be a kind of a mosaic, a composite portrait of elements of signals of trust. And I don't have the definitive answer for you on that, Neal, but I know that this is a thorny problem that's going to take some time to emerge with optimal solutions. Are we talking to your phone or to your?
No, sorry, no.
I'll like which Neal are
talking to the phone now. Yeah, it's really rough over here. I mean, it seems that one of the, and we talk a lot about tech, but that we keep running to the human problem. That sort of it's the problem of convincing people that they need to change behavior, or warning people about certain problems, or educating people about the outcomes of certain things, or just the simple thing of like, no, I really do want to have all the channels for free, so I mean, is it ultimately a human problem, and how do you solve that, and can you? I mean, because we're I guess not to get too philosophical, but we're talking about the human tendency to take the easiest path, right? So I'm going to use AI. I'm going to probably use AI for this. I'm going to pirate stuff. I'm going to steal stuff. It's easy. I'm just going to do that. I can make a bit more money that way. What kind of things can we put in, or what kind of friction or education can we put in to change that behavior? And it's a big question: is how do you shift or nudge society so that we can nip some of these problems in the bud? Any ideas?
Can I speak?
Okay
for me to go? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think about this a lot. I think a lot about how, with the right information and the right word of mouth within communities and societies, we human beings tend to arrive at the right answer and do things ourselves. And I'm talking about smoking gives you cancer. I'm talking about seatbelts in cars. I'm talking about the words we use in our common language, and how tastes and norms change, and suddenly something doesn't feel right, or doesn't sound right, or doesn't feel safe, and you say to other people, no, you shouldn't be doing this. Now, we're a long way from a 15-year-old kid seeing something on TikTok generated, a 30-second clip generated purely by AI, having been completely trained on Hollywood content, saying to another kid, you shouldn't be doing that, you're stealing content, poor old Disney. That's probably not going to happen, but there will be cases where smaller creators telling their stories, and this is what I do again within my newsletter, telling their stories, highlighting the plight of individuals that, particularly in the case, for instance, what's a sector of content which is really hurting right now is academic publishing. We have situations where scholars, scholarly writers, who spend years. In one case, an author told me one of her books took 15 years to write, because it goes through round after round of peer review. And she writes on a particular form of setting up experiments and how methodology and that sort of stuff. Really scientific content. Her 13 books have been scraped by 2 large developers, and all of her content, including the contents of that book that took 15 years, is now, because it is so in the far end of the long tail, is now completely accessible through essentially a chatbot of your choice. Now she's out there and she's telling me, and she's telling her story, and I readily identified with her because she cannot write about that subject ever again, and she's lost all of her content. So there's a very strong human emotional story around that, which I think does resonate. It will resonate with musicians, illustrators, painters, all the creators that are struggling now. The big Hollywood movie studios worth billions, there's probably going to be a bit more time before people feel sympathy about that. But with the right information campaign, the right narrative, which busts all these myths and hype of the high techs, that this is transformative, it's not doing anybody any harm. You can't actually detect verbatim outputs. I mean, it's all, to use a scientific phrase, bollocks. Let's be honest. It's nonsense, and they should be exposed. And we should all be, using our own platforms and getting politicians to expose this as well, and not just go along with this grand theft.
Yeah, I really have that sense from social media, but also talking to people that creators are taking this personally, and that there is a real sense of injustice, I guess, that this is what I have to offer. I'm a creative, even if it's just me and I'm working away on the Great American or British or whatever novel in my basement, that this is what I have to offer, and somebody just swooping in and saying, no, we can do it cheaper, faster, and at scale, is something that people take personally. And so there's just something potentially about that, people being motivated, feeling personally motivated to do something about it, or at least to work in community to try to do something about it. What is it that I guess, talking with Nathan or anybody about news networks as well, and kind of what you're feeling the approach is with news organizations and their pushback. I think maybe in AI especially, but in and how they're how again they're personally feeling about it, and the sense of urgency about fighting for their lives in terms of being organizations.
Well, there's a few layers there, and I know others have experience, and Helga and others who we've worked with a great deal. I mean, there's the first glass, the capture, the photographer, the eyewitness, the source, who, we want having that stamped and authenticated in a way that can kind of traverse, through various pipes into the journalism process and maintain that is really important. And I think, there's a variety of people at that initial glass who that might be. Again, professionals or citizens, and so that's a piece that I think is increasingly, again, that discussion earlier about noise and signal, like the more efficient we can make that so that you can trust something coming in, the better, because there is so much noise. When Witness began over 30 years ago after the Rodney King beatings, it was like, wow, what if we can get a video camera in everyone's hands? And then more recently, they put out a report called Cameras Everywhere and the problem with that. And so that really, the work with them that we've done has been all about that. There's also obviously need for, editing or redaction or blurring or other techniques that are standardized. And so, figuring out that piece and then integrating this, like I mentioned with the work with the cutting room, and we're really excited because there's a partner of ours who that's their whole business is professional media, video journalism, not only the capture, but the editing and the publishing. And so we're also going to follow their lead and understand their customers. They're actually selling a commercial solution, which is great. And understanding like how this should flow through the edit process when you're, what do you actually publish in the end? A bunch of clips and your B-roll. We did do a project with a journalist group in Middle East and North Africa who didn't really have a lot of tech, but the idea is they would still shoot with their pro cameras, but they would use proof mode as kind of their evidence camera, their proof of life. They were there. This is the B-roll. Their story might still be shot in traditional methods, but if anyone questioned it, they could back it up with this kind of array of proof. And so that's also been a way we can sort of, how do we get this stuff going without having to change everything? The last piece is that I'll mention, I recently spoke at Stanford University. Anne Grimes and Jonathan Doughton have a class they teach there. It's kind of fusion engineering journalism. And, they were also thinking about, okay, we have these authentic ingredients, but maybe we do want to use generative AI tools for creativity and sort of, investigative journalism or creative side of news publishing and if it was like a real ethical moment of like, okay, well, the sources are legitimate and we're doing something in our control. Is that okay? It's kind of the Anthony Bourdain reading the letter after his death moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot more that is out of my pay grade to think about, but I'm glad that Anne and Jonathan and others are.
Amazing.
There is a positive thing here that I would like to point out, which is like some news companies are actually quite optimistic about the AI trend, because they are doing these AI licensing deals, which is a sort of much needed cash injection to these businesses. And I think this is one of those like instances of poetic justice where, because there's so much AI slop, scraping isn't working very well. So AI training requires authenticated content or real content, and now archives are kind of in a roundabout way making money again off of their content, but that requires these archives to be organized enough to be able to service these bulk deals. But there's that silver lining.
Amazing. I think that's got to be it for us if we're going to stay on time. Guys, thank you so much. It was dynamite to talk to you, and this is wonderful stuff for the next issue of AU Journal. There's a lot to talk about, and I think any one of these topics we could do a deep dive into its own separate event. Maybe we will. Have a great day, and thank you everybody for coming, and come and see us at au-media.com. Thanks.
Thanks, Neal.
Thanks, Neal.
Yeah.